You just need to think in terms of what would a potential buyer of our product or our solution actually ask ChatGPT. Like, it sounds kind of silly, but like, as long as you're distributing it across multiple sites, you should see lift.
In today's episode, Karl from Draft.dev is sharing the results of a survey they conducted with DevTools marketers. Let's go. So what is the survey that you did?
Yeah. So, with Draft.dev, we're always looking, in the last couple of years, there's been a ton of change, to be honest, Jack. Like, some good, some bad, some I don't know yet. And so we're always trying to get a pulse on like, where's the market going? Where's it been? Where are marketers in this space like spending money? Where are they getting ROI? Where are they actually investing their hours and stuff? How are they actually using AI? All those kinds of questions. And like, we obviously ask people those sorts of things on sales calls all the time. And, I probably have, I don't know, 100 to 200 sales calls a year. So I get a fair number of data points there, but we want to do a more like structured, formal kind of questionnaire here this year. This is our first year doing it. So it was partly collected in person, partly collected remotely, depending, we go to conferences and collect it, or we send it out as a survey to our clients and prospects, people we've talked to. So it was great. I mean, we got around 50 responses, not a massive data point, number of data points, but at least like a somewhat representative sample. I mean, realistically, there's only a few hundred companies that are like big enough dev tools that it's worth talking about. So I think we did a good enough job with coverage there where I feel good in the results, but maybe not scientific level results, but at least for marketing surveys, good.
I think, isn't it 30 is usually the minimum? I mean, probably depends. I think 30
right.
is. So
I'm not a data scientist. I'm not going to claim to know what statistical significance could be. But I think either way, like, you get enough diversity in results where you start to see, okay, there's some alignment on certain things, and somewhere it's like, man, maybe nobody knows the answer here. Anyways, there's some big highlights came out of this for me. One is, 2025 budgets were very constrained, especially in the first half of the year in marketing. There was a lot of fear around what are tariffs going to do to the general economy. What is, the US has such an outsized weight on the developer tool economy because a lot of the spending is here and a lot of the talent is here and the companies get funded here. So when the US is in a bit of a political, economic uncertain time, it sort of ripples through the whole industry. So we saw a lot of clients, anecdotally pulling back on spending, being more cautious, saying we're going to wait on projects. And that was the story of 2025. And I talked to a lot of agency owners that work in the dev tool space. Almost everybody had that same, sort of pullback last year. This year, that is not the case. When we did this survey, about 62% of the teams that we talked to are increasing their budgets, and most of the rest are basically holding steady. And so there's only like about 10% that said they're likely to decrease budgets, which that's a very small number. So my feeling there is that all the new investment coming into AI and the stabilizing of, well, at least for the moment, the U.S. economy has kind of like given people a little more confidence to spend in marketing. And so that's sort of a good thing overall for those of us who work in the space. But I think it's also good to know that your competitors are probably going to be spending more this year than they were last year. So if you want to keep an eye on where they're going, probably important to know that.
Yeah. And was there a pattern among the companies that are increasing or holding steady and those that aren't?
Not really. Not that it's easy to point out. And we asked this survey anonymously too. So like, we don't really want to like go in and be like, try to dissect which companies are, spending more and which aren't. That's not really our goal here, to make anybody feel bad. And part of the reason we can get good results is people they can't share their company, because they're not going to tell you that. So no big pattern. I mean, it was across the board. Like, the smaller startups are getting funding right now. That seems to be, if you've got a good AI story, you should be spending more because you've got funding. The bigger companies tend to be, if they've started to implement AI in their workflows or starting to leverage it to get, better products out, they're still really in demand and they're still feeling like good about spending on marketing. So it seems across the board, but there's probably some variability in there.
Yeah. Cause I guess my question, be curious, like around, it's like, you always think, okay, so what's the impact here on DevTools, right? Like the AI growth. There's obviously, if you're selling AI, then that's great. But if you're selling, and probably if you're selling compute, that's probably also great.
Yep.
I mean, that's sort of close things. But then how does it play out for something that could potentially be in the realms of the sort of thing that you see on Twitter where they're like, I just vibe coded this
Yeah.
X alternative. Would it be a pattern that those companies were spending less that are, yeah, basically it's like, I guess trying to dig into is is this kind of people buying rather than building rather than
Yeah, yeah.
buying
There's
thing?
some fear that there will be more building because building is cheaper. Especially I've heard this in the platform engineering space where in the past few years there's been a big migration towards things like Backstage for example, for
Mm,
platform engineering. And there's a number of tools. Port, I think, is another one that's kind of in the similar vein. Um, because these tools are basically just kind of like a way to track and monitor and administer Kubernetes essentially. Like there's some concern in that space that like more people will just build that stuff on their own because it's a fairly, again, I'm simplifying here, but for a lot of companies it's a fairly straightforward set of tasks. For really big enterprise, I think that probably gets less true, but for small to mid-sized companies, do you need a Backstage or a Port? Like, probably not, to be perfectly honest. So some of those kinds of companies may see some headwinds or may see a shift towards like a specific part of the market that's more open to spending on it. But again, like the overall pattern or what I've seen is like because there's money trickling into AI tools, they've still got to buy developer tools behind the scenes. I mean, even these ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, they have hundreds and thousands of engineers building real stuff and then deploying it and running security checks on it. Like those people are still doing productive engineering. Like the AI agents aren't replacing them yet. Now, will it happen in 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years? I don't know. But at the moment, at least, the sort of boom here has basically trickled down and seems to be benefiting all developers. The other bit is that a lot of companies are shifting their products towards more of an AI story. Some of that's a little bit of just marketing, fresh coat of paint on things. Some of it is like legitimately they're using AI in interesting ways. So just depends.
okay. Yeah, yeah. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
The other thing that I will say about this, looking at these kind of on the AI topic before we get off that, is that there's in marketing teams we talk to, a lot of people are experimenting with it right now, but there is no consensus on how it's best used or no standardization around how companies are using it. So one of the things I would ask is like, okay, have you played with AI? 96% of people say yes. Great. That makes sense. Of course, we're all in tech. We hear about it every day. But only like 7% of people are like, oh, yeah, it's unlocking significant value for us. It's saving us lots of hours very steadily, not requiring a ton of manual overhead and rework. And this is just in November of last year that we finished this survey, in December of last year. So this is not, this is 3 months old data, not that old. So I was a little surprised by that because my number would be much higher as far as like how much it's helped us at Draft.dev in the last year or two. But I thought that was interesting.
yeah, that's actually very surprisingly low. Did they say what things had been helpful to them?
Yes. So we asked kind of about the categories of things that you're using it for. Where is it helpful? The biggest area was like written content editing and planning. And that seems to be pretty much, I won't say across the board, everybody's doing it. I think it was somewhere around 60% of people say they're using it for that. And it's consistently helping. But what a lot of people mention is that it still requires like an actual knowledgeable subject matter expert to catch any hallucinations or like make sure that things are like subtly correct and sound like a real engineer would create them or whatever. And that's always been one of the trickiest bits about using AI in this space is like we're not selling the best body soap here. We're selling very complex technical products that are changing really quickly. So if you write something based on, that all the LLMs are writing stuff based on source material that's often a couple years out of date or something, they can get off really quickly and in subtle ways that are very hard to catch. So marketers they struggle to trust these tools because right now they're not that accurate. And I think that's something we've got to see improve if we want to really see them used at scale in dev marketing at least.
Yeah, I guess that's the obvious one that I would have guessed, I suppose. That content, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. Surprisingly
Some
low.
people
So, yeah.
Yeah, some people are using them for like ads and doing dynamic ads and managing ads across different platforms. There's some AI use cases for that, creating copy and more A/B tests and things like that. I think is interesting.
Mm,
There, are some people who are using it to help with kind of lead qualification, which also makes sense. Again, like if you're a marketer and you're getting leads in consistently, how good are these leads and can you score them? And AI does a good
Mm,
job of like building some kind of contextual knowledge around names and emails and other data that's structured. So there's some use cases there that are interesting. But I think one thing that I found also as I like dug into why isn't this stuff getting used,
yeah.
um, part of the reason is that companies haven't figured out exactly how best to deploy it and let their teams use it in a productive way. So, for example, I talked to a marketer who's at a big cloud company, and they were like, "Yeah, we're allowed to use these tools. Certain ones are on our whitelist or whatever. Certain ones aren't. We're not allowed to, but we don't have a company account that lets me share these things with other team members. So I'm over here using Gemini. The guy next to me uses ChatGPT. The other guy over there likes Claude, and like so they've all got their own little workflows they're building in silos, and it's not like standardized or really sanctioned. Even I think that's part of the problem as to why they're limited in their usefulness and utility is that people just aren't like they're not all using them together. Everybody is like each man for themselves, trying to get the most they can out of this.
Mm, that's so interesting. I was speaking to one of my friends who's not in tech, well, works at like a SaaS company, but not very like in the way we would think of it.
Yeah.
And she was doing like a presentation on how to use Copilot at the company. And she was like, "It's so great. Copilot's amazing." And my friend and my other friend was there, and he is like a data scientist, more or less. And he like secretly uses all these tools. Copilot is the one that they have internally. And he's like, "It is terrible."
Yeah.
Like, he's like, "I can't," but
That's right.
and he was going to her like, "It is rubbish. Like, there's so much better stuff out there. You just,"
Yeah.
and that was kind of, I wonder if there's the bigger companies where it's like, you have to use
That's
the
right.
kind of
My
the tool for, yeah.
absolutely. I think those of us like you and I, Jack, we work at small enough companies where we can just go try something and bring it in. And if it saves us time, our bosses or, I'm going to say yes. Your
You're
boss
the
is going to
boss.
say yes. Yeah, I'm the boss in my case. But either way, like it's the adoption curve is nothing. There's no adoption curve other than Carl brought in a tool and it looks cool. Let's do it. But my wife works in healthcare and we were talking about this and she's the same way. She has Copilot. That's the only one they're allowed to use. It's even an older version of Copilot because they're not allowed to upgrade models as frequently because of all sorts of BS behind the scenes. And so her output is very poor in relative terms for LLMs. And this is one of the things that I think we forget in tech sometimes is even though they say the agent tools are going to be good enough to displace so many white collar workers in 1, 3, 5 years, whatever the timeline is, the adoption cycles still take time. And there's just like if there were a way to shortcut that, we'd be in a different world than we are today. And I'm not saying it won't happen, just saying that it may be a little longer than we give it credit for because of these like company internal adoptions and changing human behaviors and procurements that are just painful and that stuff doesn't go away just because AI is really good.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a huge factor of it. Do you think there is also like, is there a fundamental difference between the stuff, it's incredibly useful for programming, obviously, for marketing? Is it just less useful as well? Is that a part of it?
I would say no. In our experience at Draft.dev, so last year we heavily reworked our whole production model around AI workflows. And so we built several, we've got multiple tools working in tandem and we've got engineers in the loop at key points in the process. And used to take us 4 to 6 weeks and several rounds of revisions with real humans and editors to get a single piece of content out. That was the old way. And now it's 2 or 3 hours with one engineer and a couple different LLMs in the loop to get the same quality of content consistently finished and delivered to clients. So I will say that for us at creating content, it has been a huge boost to productivity and our ability to output. And then just our ability to respond quickly to what's coming up or what's changed, new releases, things like that, that we would have taken weeks to get stuff out before. And now we can do it in a day. So not every company wants to put out a mass amount of content, but right now, one of the big edges that smaller startups are getting is around optimizing for LLMs. So AEO is what, maybe it's being called, or GEO, depending on who you ask. And the only way to optimize for LLMs is basically put out content that shows them and tells them how your product works, how it compares to others, what it does well, et cetera. And, generating more content and putting it on more places is just that seems to be working right now as far as like improving discovery through AEO. So I don't think this is going to go away or be like insignificant. I think this is going to be a huge lever for companies that can lean into AI or AI powered workflows, or agencies like ours that use AI to power this stuff. We can, our prices essentially like went in half last year when we implemented all this stuff because it was just that much more productive and there's no reason to keep prices high.
Done. How does it work in the sense? So could you even just like at a high level, like how does
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, very high level, like there's a lot of streams of input that you need to create good technical content. You need to know about the product you're talking about. You need to know about the sort of integrations or other products around it. You need to know about the alternatives and market around it. So we collect a lot of this stuff manually and through conversations with clients and whatever to get a bunch of context. And then there's a whole other feed of information of like stylistic information, whether it's preferences the client has, or it's just best practices that we've implemented, or it's little things you can do to make AI sound less like AI. Just all that stuff needs to get fed into the initial
Hmm.
prompt. We do that. And then for each piece of content, there's a manual process of creating the like specific technical expectations for the piece of content that's going to be generated. So a real engineer, in our case, we've got a couple hundred, that work around the world, and a real engineer comes in there and helps with that initial building of the prompt. That gets fed into a model. Another model checks that model, and then the engineer gets something that they can do a final quality control check on that's somewhere around 75 to 80% of the way there. And then they can do the things like make sure it didn't hallucinate any facts or version, numbers are actually correct and make sense. Check actual code to make sure it runs. And again, I think there's a world where we could automate a lot of that stuff too, but we're just kind of like picking away at the pieces as we can.
So can it do what kind of content does it is it able to do? What kind does it struggle?
So it is, let's see, that's a good question. Right now, we have used on every type of content that we've ever produced for clients. So everything from tutorials where we show hands-on how to actually build stuff, all the way up to like higher level thought leadership stuff. What we have is a series, there's different prompts for each of those different types of content. And there is a little more manual work on certain edge case things. So for example, if a client just released, like literally in the last 2 weeks, something that hasn't been indexed by LLMs, has very little documentation, no use cases, yeah, you can ask the LLM to write a piece of content around it, but it's probably going to be pretty wrong. It's going to take a lot of manual work to fix. Um, that's pretty rare though. I mean, if we're building out, more, standard types of content tutorials, we tend to, be able to get pretty close in the first draft. But yeah, it works. I was, it's funny, Jack, you're saying all this, like the same things I asked last year was like, is this even possible? Like seriously, like because it felt like our processes were just too complex and too many subtle things, but the tools have gotten a lot better and they're now better at checking each other, which has been a really big game changer in like getting things to a level where we can uh, reliably count on them more often. So, when you ask one LLM to check another one's output, you often get a lot of like potential issues, and then we can flag those for a human editor to actually look at and review instead of making, a human editor go through line by line and measure every single thing. So there's tons of little things you can do like that to chip away at the productivity. Same with like client comments. So client comes in with comments about how they talk about their product. AI processes, LLM processes that, and then feeds that back into our inputs for the next piece of content we do for them. So every time a client's giving us revisions, we're basically getting better at it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too far on the like just talking about Draft.dev. I mean, I could talk about it all day, but I also feel like I'm happy to share
Well,
more about reports and data and stuff
I
too. But
mean, I find it interesting. I guess my initial and I'll be curious on this. My initial reaction was like, well, I know some tutorials have taken me days and embarrassing number of days
yes,
to do well. And it's like constant checking. And there's always like things in it. I just go through and build it and I make sure that someone like imagine I'm a person coming in, like, would I understand this? Would I understand this? Would I do it? All this sorts of stuff. Go through each process. Like, is it progressive? Is it all this kind of thing? And I guess when you were talking, I'm just running through each of those difficulties and thinking,
right, right.
does it make sense that an LLM can do that? And I suppose it's It probably
Again, there's
does.
going to be edge cases where it can't. I'm not going to tell you like it's going to 100% every piece of content we do. And we'll have, when that happens, what we do is we take its output and we see where did it go wrong? And we try to learn from that and like feed that
Yeah.
back into future prompts and get better. But sometimes, like to your point, sometimes the information out there is wrong or not out there. And that in those cases, everybody's going to have a hard time with that tutorial. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer with 10 years of experience or an LLM that's just pulling data from the internet.
That's true. Yeah.
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 But anyway, I say all this because I think what's interesting about this is that, yes, we're doing this right now. I think other companies will do this in the future. I don't think we have any magic that like we've learned that other people, we're wrapping LLMs. We're not doing anything that sophisticated. So my ultimate question is, when content production becomes cheaper and cheaper over time, where do you get your edge in marketing? Where do you get, in front of more people? And I think distribution is going to be a bigger and bigger challenge and question mark for people. Right now, putting out a lot of good content, technical content, and making sure you show up in LLMs consistently when buyers are looking for what's the best dev tool to do X or whatever. That's a great strategy, but that may not last for another year or two as we get agents actually doing purchasing on behalf of people. And so then again, we may go through this big shift again, like how do you distribute better for agents and agentic workflows and payment cycles and stuff. I don't know what that's going to look like, Jack, but that's something I think about at night. Like how do we keep distribution, like keep building an edge in distribution and getting better at getting stuff in front of whoever the buyer is.
Mm. Do you have initial thoughts on?
I have a couple theories. So this ties back. I'll tie it back. I'll do a little tie it all together. This ties it back into an area that a lot of people are playing with right now, which is influencers. When we pulled out like which channels that you use right now are you experimenting with and which channels drive the most consistent ROI, the number of people, like basically it's a 1-to-1. Influencers in video marketing has the lowest ROI that's measurable of any channel right now, at least that from the people we talk to. But it has the highest experimentation rate. So everybody's trying it right now. And what's cool about that, and I think they're on this, I think this is not dumb. I think it's like any new marketing channel, you're trying to push things on the edge and get your little bit of like delta that you can over your competitors. And these are new channels that don't have sort of known ROI, and it's going to be risky, but it could pay off big. And, people in our space love that sort of trade-off. So the reason I mention that is that I do think that human distribution, like the actual following you can build right now, is going to be a very important asset in the next 1 to 5 years. Because if I start to realize that LLMs are kind of manipulated by people building lots of content and doing a really good job with distribution, where do I go besides just, writing with LLMs? I got to go to my friends. I got to go to the people I follow. Like, I think this has always been one of the other channels that gets kind of like neglected when talking about developer marketing. It's just that word of mouth. How do we get more of the word of mouth? And I think influencer marketing is essentially a version of that. It's one answer to that. Others are doing it on Reddit. Others are doing it through communities. The number one channel for ROI, because again, this is kind of like the same idea, is human connections at events and community events and, meetups. And what I think is interesting about that is it just shows you how, like, as the digital channels of marketing get saturated and flooded, people kind of go the other direction towards in-person stuff again. And so kind of cool to see it. I mean, again, it's maybe not, I don't know if that's good or bad for us at Draft.dev, but it's just an interesting data point.
Yeah, I guess like content, a lot of technical content becomes quite similar to, you don't necessarily go there for like the human experience, personality that you want to. Sometimes you do, maybe. And I
Sometimes you
think there
do.
are
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
like incredible pieces, but it's usually the stuff that's kind of interest. Like if, Ben from Planet Scale writes an amazing blog post on databases, like it's just a unique and it's his personal thing and it's skill, and LLMs probably won't be able to do that for a very long
Totally.
time.
And I would argue that that's like influencer marketing. That's like thought leadership stuff. I mean, it's like, I know he's not an influencer for sale, but like he is clearly an influencer who has his own personal
Sure.
cachet to anything he writes. Whether an LLM wrote it for him, which I doubt, or he wrote it himself, he is going to, like, because he has that following and that reputation, he is going to attract an audience. And I think that's going to become more and more valuable. So founders doing things like building themselves up into influencers or building their own followings and their own kind of reputations, that's got to be a factor if you're starting a business now or you're working in DevTools now. Probably much more than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah. I think it is. Yeah, I think you're right. There's like Twitter personalities, YouTube, like
Yeah.
Primeagen, all these kind of, I mean,
Yep.
on plus all the smaller ones, but I think it is. It's funny how there is also just this kind of like lifestyle, developer lifestyle stuff as well. It's like
Totally. Yeah.
Primeagen. Most of it's not super, super technical. It's more like lifestyle stuff of like
Yeah. Well,
kind
it's
of,
like it's all like all those programming subreddits, right? Like, yes,
yeah,
there's some actual influential, interesting tech in there, but also there's a lot of memes about what it's like to be a programmer
yeah,
when your boss interrupts you. I mean, just all this stuff that we're like in this crowd where we have these in jokes, and that's kind of a human thing. It's just to like have your in jokes and your crowd that you feel part of, and devs want to feel bad. Like that makes sense.
yeah, true. Yeah, what Carl, were there any other interesting tidbits in the survey?
Yeah, I'll mention also the challenge right now in content that came up over and over from this survey, but also anecdotally I hear is this like if you've been building SEO for the last 5 or 10 years, like a lot of our clients have, you're probably struggling a bit. Last year there's a huge challenge where what they call zero click results was, basically Google has more and more weighted towards like the AI written results, especially for high level terms like what is a data engineer? Now you could argue that I'll tell a quick story on that because I think that topic specifically is really funny. I remember 4 years ago at Draft.dev, there was what is a data warehouse was a topic that no less than I'm not joking with you, no less than 10 clients requested we write an article called What is a Data Warehouse? And I every time just cringed because like it's such a stupid fucking idea for an article. Like, I mean, it's like a Wikipedia. Wikipedia is going to be the default source. Why am I going to like X company's blog to find out what is a data warehouse? Everybody felt like this is a high, it was, they all did the same keyword research. This is a large volume keyword with very low competition because it's brand new and it's coming on the scene. It's a cool thing to talk about. And so let's all write our big, 3,000 word piece on it. And we did a million of those and it was fine. I mean, some of them are good, some of them are great, some of them are meh, but like whatever, like that was a strategy that worked for top of funnel traffic. Now, my problem with that article is not really that it's a bad article or that it's bad content. It's just that there's no intent to buy your product just because you define data warehouse really well. And just think about like if 5 years ago, Jack, you're asking what's a data warehouse? I've never heard that term before. The first article is some company and you read the article and yeah, it's pretty good. Like, sure, you've got their brand name in, but like you're not buying their product right there. Like it's not like I need to go buy your data lake solution just because I read your really good article about what is a data warehouse. So it's not a bad piece of content, but it's pretty like low intent as far as like actually getting users. And so people would write these, low intent, high volume keyword things and get a lot of vanity traffic, but that doesn't really move the needle for like actual, I don't know, users. And so Google started to take those results and basically just say, we'll just summarize it ourselves with AI. So very few clicks start going through to people who've been optimizing for these high level keywords. And a lot of companies we've worked with or still work with saw huge dips in traffic as that took off or kind of happened last year. And now what's happened is we got to focus more of the content towards the middle and bottom of the funnel because that's where buyers start to come to the actual site. So what I mean is if you think about your buying behavior, it's probably shifted a lot in the last year, Jack, like mine has. Like I was searching for a new microphone not too long ago. I didn't Google best microphone. I asked ChatGPT, hey, I'm a blah, 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 and I do a podcast and I'd like to have a good microphone that meets these criteria and is under this price point. What are my options? Right. And it gave me half a dozen options and I went and made a purchase like based on that. I think that's a much more common vector now than searching what is a data warehouse and figuring out, oh, that company wrote a really good data warehouse article. So now I should follow them and 2 years later, maybe buy their product. Like it's just, that's a long cycle. So you could see how AI can really cut down a lot of those steps, but you got to optimize for content that hits that middle to bottom of funnel. And a lot of people in the, that I talked to around the survey were talking about their shifts in marketing strategy around that. And I thought it was pretty interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, tactically, it's like actually pretty straightforward. You just need to think in terms of what would a potential buyer of our product or our solution actually ask ChatGPT. Like it sounds kind of silly, but like that's pretty much it. And then at the moment, the tools are pretty limited as far as what kind of insight they give you into the prompts, the best prompts to optimize for. But either way, as long as you're directionally thinking about those kinds of questions and then building content that answers those questions and then distributing it across multiple sites, you should see lift, and that tends to work for our clients at the moment.
Interesting. Yeah. And distributing it, how are people does it need to have like like I always think if it's just if you're Ben from Planet Scale and you've
Right.
just written this incredible article, you can just post it everywhere and other people will start posting it to Hacker News and stuff. But if you've written an article, I don't know, the best data warehouse for XYZ specific low
Yeah.
funnel stuff, where do you distribute a piece of content that is pretty like it's I mean, it's not gonna make it to Hacker News, you know?
Yeah.
Where does
Right.
the
Right. Right.
how do you
I think
distribute that stuff?
you're. I'm gonna paraphrase your question. Where do you distribute a shitty piece of content like that? You know, no.
Kind of, yeah.
Um, I joke a little bit because like I get what you're saying. I think this is gonna be the like multi-billion-dollar question in dev marketing in the next few years. I don't think I have like a perfect answer for you. I can tell you what we do today and what we try today and what kind of seems to work, but I can also tell you that it doesn't feel like we figured it out or anybody's figured it out. So what we do today is we have clients post, content to their own site. We have similar versions of all that content that goes out onto other sites like Dev.to or Medium or writers' individual blogs, LinkedIn. We ask clients and we work with clients to get that content shared across both their company and founder and key employee LinkedIn pages so that you've got more organic, reach there. Newsletters, we do as well a lot of paid promotion and distribution through newsletters now. That's been more interesting channel than it has been in the past. And so I think that's something you can think about for really high value pieces to get more distribution. And honestly, again, there's a lot of I mean, there's people trying a lot of other things. There's people trying to hack stuff into Reddit. I don't know, maybe it works. I'm like 50-50 on that. I feel like it's kind of a short-term thing. Reddit will crack down on it or the platform will get devalued because it's just full of junk. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of other, you can find niche communities and Slack groups. I think to me, what's most compelling is finding a few key channels that work consistently for you and then rinsing and repeating on those and just kind of like trying not to overcomplicate things. Because as long as you do have some distribution, you probably get indexed, but you certainly don't want to just post it and hope. You want to do a little more than that.
Yeah. There's this company that I kind of met the founder and incredible guy, and they just absolutely just crushed it, grew insanely well and London based. And then their whole thing was like SEO and they
Mhm.
were huge into SEO. And then the whole story that isn't told, that was like behind the scenes part, was that they had a ton of people in the Philippines, like creating backlinks for them.
Yeah.
And that was like kind of the sort of secret source was actually just this army of people just creating backlinks.
Yeah.
And does, is that, I guess, is that still like the kind of dirty secret of how all this stuff works? Um, yeah,
It
that's the
can I
first
mean, it
question.
can
Yeah.
it's a good question. It can help. So let's walk through like how an LLM answers a query like what is the best data warehouse for my very specific use case. Often what they're doing is looking at their existing index of content and then likely also or in certain queries they're googling as well or they're doing some kind of search to get more current information. And so part of the strength and weakness of LLMs is they are all building off of traditional search anyway. And so if your if part of your strategy all across the board to get noticed in LLMs is ranking well in search to make sure that they pick us up when they go do a query based on the latest results, then you probably want to do some level of backlink building. Now, it doesn't have to be like that kind of, link warehouse type stuff where you've got millions of people hacking in your backlinks into to other sites. I think the more effective way to do it is like building links in a more organic and natural way where they actually make sense. Like, so going to your partners and asking if you can write, pieces on their blog, or update some of their pages to have references to you where it makes sense. Going to your investors, going to your employees and asking them for those sorts of like just kudos and mentions. Um, we don't right now, we don't actively do any backlink building like that. So I can't speak to a ton of personal experience, but I do know that some people are doing that. I get a lot of outreach for all of our websites to add different, brands want to get added to certain listicles and things like that. That's all. It's just part of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like it's one of those ones that's just not spoken about as much as
Yeah.
because I'd kind of dug into SEO a little bit, and then it was just
Yeah.
like, oh, actually, this is the secret. It's just like probably
But
changed
I
now.
think it's really hard in DevTools. Backlink building is super hard because if I went to one of those agencies, they wouldn't have a bunch of other really deep technical content to reference me from. They'd go to like consumer electronics brands and try to like work in backlinks to, Sneak or something. And it just doesn't really make sense. Like and so there's a lot of debate in the SEO world about how much is that backlink that's not really relevant even worth. And my answer is it's probably not worth that much. But if you go with the Sneak example, like if Okta is backlinking to Sneak, that probably means something like that. That's a big
Yeah,
deal. These are both well-known, brands in the space. And so like, there's a lot more weight to that backlink. And so I think again, if you're trying a bunch of backlink stuff and it's working, I'm always curious to hear about it. I've not heard a lot of our clients in DevTools get a ton of lift out of that sort of like backlink, it's not even black hat, but just that kind of like going out and trying to pay for a bunch of links and doing it at mass. I just haven't seen it.
okay, super interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, okay. Any other exciting insights?
No, man. I think we covered a lot of my favorites. This data report, we're gonna try to do this every year. We'll have probably more companies participate next year. I think it was a really good first time to do it. So if you want to go to draft.dev and download the whole thing, there's a little bar at the top. They'll show you how to do it. And then I'm always happy to chat about this kind of stuff. I geek out on learning where this industry is going because I think right now we're in like the greatest state of change that we've seen in the last 5 or 10 years. And it's an industry that's high change no matter what. So that's saying something.
Yeah, true, true. Yeah, it is quite the change. Um, and how is on the side thing? So how is life as a multi-agency owner?
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to like figure out how to make your life more challenging, buy a second company. That's the the end of that story. No, it's good. So yeah, for a little context, like I started Draft.dev about 6 years ago, and then a couple years ago, my partner and I bought a podcast production agency. Um, uh, I it's very interesting. This is totally off the DevTools marketing track, but it's
Sure,
so
people will.
interesting to own. Yeah, we can edit this out if you want. I don't care.
No, I'm sure people will find it interesting. Yeah,
Okay, well, good. Well, good.
I think they will.
So interesting how other industries do not think the same way a lot of developer tools and very deeply technical companies do. So our client base at the podcast consultant, this other company we bought, is almost all financial advisors and investors, very long-term thinkers, very slow and steady wins the race type people. They don't worry about the 18-month funding timeline that every small startup we work with has to deal with. Or even the bigger companies, when they go, like we work with a lot of big publicly traded companies, they have a down quarter, they immediately cut all the marketing budgets. They might fire their CMO and their whole, leadership team. They're very volatile companies, even big ones in tech. There's not much stability in this industry. Whereas the financial services industry is very stable, very like slow and steady is their kind of mantra. They see the value and compounding over time. That's their whole business model. So what the reason I say that is like the podcast consultant has almost no churn, almost no changes in clients. It's very hard to get clients, but it's also very hard to lose them. And so that part of the business has been really nice and stable versus Draft.dev, which is every year is a whole new set of challenges. And we like in tech also we adopt technology much faster. And so again, contrasting, our financial advisors are just now understanding that ChatGPT is out there, but they can't really use it yet because there's a lot of regulations around what financial data they can share and how. And so there's a lot of limitations there. Versus our clients at Draft.dev are constantly pushing the limits on what AI can do. And it's cool. I can geek out on that, but it also makes it super hard to run a stable business. And so I don't know, there's goods and bads everywhere. Like it's been fun to compare the two. I will say that like, um, when you own two small companies, you have to pick your problems that you want to tackle and which ones you can live with, and that you can't fix everything. So there's times when one company's not doing great and it's just not going to do great. And there's times when we're just not going to get everything we want done, but we have to like prioritize relentlessly. And, I've gotten fairly good at that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what do you think matters running an agency?
So the biggest the biggest thing is client acquisition. Almost all small agencies operate on the founder's personal reputation as their primary lead driver. And that is fine until the founder wants to step away a little bit and be less of a day-to-day active participant. We operate on an assumption that we're going to get, and both companies do this today, about 30% of our clients through referral, about 30% through SEO and GEO or AEO, just basically LLMs and search. And the other 30% is going to be some kind of like mix of social, unattributable events, just kind of random touch points here and there, rebound clients, things like that. That holds true for both of our companies. And that's something that we like actively work to maintain, because if you don't have that mix, it's very easy to get to a point where, say, the founder's personal network kind of is tapped out, and then what do? You got nothing coming in. It would be nice if you could just count on your clients to just stick around forever, but again, like this industry is pretty volatile. So if you're going to start a service business here, you have to be ready to like constantly be acquiring new clients. Even we've had a few that have gone on for 3 or more years with us at Draft.dev, but very few who have lasted 5 or 6, versus the podcast consultant. Half of our shows are 6, 7 years in to working with us. So very different personality, like profile, and very different type of customer. So it's just good to know that.
Yeah. Super, super interesting. Yeah. Wild. It's a very different world.
It is. And it's coming from a developer. Like this has been, for me personally, what's been interesting has been learning the sales side of things. Like I'm not a salesperson. I was a developer. This is all just like I'm making it up as I go. And now I'm the sales guy at both these agencies. And I like it, but I also recognize that it is a very different skill set. And a lot of times developers tend to undervalue sales and marketing. And this is probably a common theme for your show and your career arc as well, Jack, is like, how much like tech tools think that they can just build a really great product and the users will come. It's just hard to do that. And so I do have a lot more appreciation for good sales and marketing people than I had, maybe 5, 6 years ago when I was not in this role.
Yeah, it's hard jobs. Yeah. Shout out to sales and marketing people.
Give them some credit. It's a tough job.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Karl, that was awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, always happy to do it.
Yeah. Where can people go to learn more about what you're working on and about Draft.dev?
Yeah, so Draft.dev website is the name. So you can always check that out. We've got our latest report on there. We've got all sorts of good lead magnets. We share a lot about how we, internal processes, best practices. Like we're just constantly putting stuff out. And then karllhughes.com is my personal website if you want to follow my little journey of trying to build some small businesses here. Very slow, not tech businesses for the most part. But yeah, I'm always happy to share on LinkedIn too. I'm pretty active out there and love hearing from developers and DevTools people who are starting their own thing or just trying to figure it all out, because there's a lot to navigate.
Amazing. Thanks, Karl, and thanks everyone for listening.